The winter of 1887 came down from the mountains like a judgment. It buried the wagon ruts beneath hard white drifts and sealed the creeks under plates of gray ice. Wind moved across the Wyoming plains without meeting a tree or hill tall enough to slow it. It worried at barn roofs, slipped through cabin walls, and drove cattle into tight, shivering circles. At the north end of Bitter Creek Valley, where the land rose toward a line of black pines, Elias Ward worked alone. He rose before daylight, cracked the ice in the water trough, and carried hay to the cattle while the stars still burned above the ridge. His beard gathered frost. His gloves had been patched so often that little remained of the original leather. By sunrise, smoke rose from one chimney on the Ward ranch. No other light showed in the windows. The house was larger than Elias needed. It had been built when he believed a man could fill rooms merely by building them. There was a kitchen with a long table, a parlor no one used, and 3 small bedrooms at the end of the hall. Their doors remained closed. Elias slept near the stove in the room that had once been his father's. He ate from the same tin plate each evening. He spoke more often to his mare than to another human being. Folks in town called him dependable. They also called him distant, though never where he could hear. Once a week, he rode 8 miles to Mercer's Crossing for flour, coffee, lamp oil, and whatever news had survived the weather. He entered the general store, nodded to whoever stood behind the counter, paid in coins, and left before anyone could ask him to stay. On the second Saturday of January, the wind fell strangely still. The silence made Elias uneasy. He found 6 men gathered around the stove inside the store. Their coats steamed. Their voices dropped when he entered. Silas Mercer stood behind the counter, holding a folded sheet of paper. "Ward," he said. Mail came through. Elias removed one glove. The letter bore no family name he recognized. The handwriting was careful, but faint, as though the writer had been trying to make one pencil last. He opened it beside a barrel of salt. "Mr. Ward, Mrs. Mercer told my cousin you may require help at your ranch. I can cook, mend, keep a house, milk cows, and tend chickens. I am a widow with 3 children. I understand this may make the arrangement unsuitable. We need honest work and shelter until spring. My children will not be troublesome. Respectfully, Clara Bennett." Elias read the letter twice. "I never said I required help," he said. Silas rubbed his jaw. "My wife may have mentioned you ought to." A few men near the stove smiled. Elias folded the paper. "Where is she?" The smiles faded. Silas looked toward the window. "She arrived on yesterday's stage." The widow was staying in a room behind the church, where the stove smoked and the roof leaked near the chimney. Elias found her there, with her 3 children. Clara Bennett stood when he entered. She was thin beneath a brown wool dress that had been mended at both elbows. Her dark hair was pinned back, though loose strands curled around a face worn pale by travel. The oldest child was a boy of perhaps 11. He stood between Elias and the others without being told. A smaller boy watched from beside the stove. A little girl slept under 2 coats on a narrow bench. Clara held out her hand. "Mr. Ward." Her fingers were cold. Elias removed his hat. "Mrs. Bennett." She waited for him to speak. When he did not, her chin lifted by a small degree. "My letter may have given the wrong impression. I am not asking for charity. I know. I can work. I expect so." The older boy studied Elias with open suspicion. Clara glanced toward the sleeping girl. "We can remain here until another arrangement is found." A drop of brown water fell from the ceiling into a wash basin. Elias looked at the smoking stove, the damp blankets, and the frost forming along the inside of the window. "How old are they?" "Thomas is 11. Samuel is 7. Ruth is 4. Elias nodded once. "When can you leave?" Clara blinked. "You are offering the position? The road will be worse tomorrow." She gathered their belongings in less than 10 minutes. Everything the Bennett family owned fit inside one trunk, a flour sack, and a wooden box with a cracked lid. Thomas carried the box. Samuel carried a tin cup and a cloth rabbit belonging to Ruth. Clara held the little girl beneath her coat during the ride. They traveled in Elias's wagon, beneath a sky the color of iron. Clara sat upright beside him. She did not complain when the wheels struck frozen ruts. The children huddled in the hay behind them. Halfway to the ranch, Ruth began to cough. Elias pulled a folded horse blanket from beneath the seat and passed it back without speaking. When they reached the house, darkness had begun to spread across the snow. Clara looked at the porch, the barn, the fenced fields, and the broad roof of the house. "You live here alone?" "Yes." Thomas climbed down from the wagon. "Why?" "Thomas," Clara said. Elias met the boy's eyes. "It got that way." Inside, the house smelled of pine smoke, coffee, and unused rooms. Elias lit 2 lamps. Clara stood in the kitchen with Ruth in her arms, while the boys remained near the door. "There's food in the pantry," Elias said. "Well, pump freezes after midnight. Best fill the bucket before then." Clara nodded. "And the sleeping arrangements?" Elias looked toward the hallway. He had not opened the doors that morning. He had not entered those rooms in nearly 6 years. "Come along." He led them past the parlor. In the first bedroom stood a narrow bed with a clean straw mattress. In the second were 2 smaller frames. The third held a wider bed beneath the window. Each had been stripped of blankets long ago. Clara looked from one room to the next. "There are 4 beds." "Yes." "You prepared them?" Elias stared at the floorboards. "After I received your letter. But you only received it today. I came home before finding you." That was all he said. He brought quilts from a cedar chest and left Clara to arrange them. At supper, she made stew from dried beans, salt pork, and the last 2 onions in the pantry. Elias ate slowly, while the children sat in silence. Samuel dropped his spoon. The sound struck the table like a gunshot. The child froze. Elias bent, picked up the spoon, wiped it on his sleeve, and returned it. "There are more spoons," he said. Samuel looked at his mother before taking it. That first night, Elias lay awake near the stove. Through the wall came unfamiliar sounds. Floorboards creaked. A child whispered. Clara crossed the hallway twice to tend Ruth's cough. The house no longer sounded empty. He was not certain whether the change comforted or frightened him. Clara rose before him the next morning. When Elias entered the kitchen, bread dough rested beneath a cloth. Coffee steamed in the pot. His wet gloves hung near the stove, turned so the damaged seams faced the heat. "You needn't wake this early," he said. "You hired me." He poured coffee. Thomas appeared moments later, already dressed. "I can help outside. You know cattle?" "No." "Horses?" "No." Elias drank from his cup. "Then you can learn." The days found a rhythm. Clara swept dust from rooms Elias had forgotten. She scrubbed soot from the stove, patched curtains, and made meals from stores he had considered nearly useless. Dried apples became pies. Hard biscuits became pudding. The kitchen began to smell of yeast and cinnamon. Thomas followed Elias through the snow. At first, the boy asked too many questions. Why did cows face away from the wind? Why did the bay mare bite at strangers? Why did Elias check the southern fence every afternoon when no cattle grazed there? Elias answered only what mattered. Watch their ears. Stand where the horse can see you. A fence breaks before a storm, not during it. Thomas learned to close gates without being reminded. He learned to carry grain without spilling it. He learned that quiet work earned more respect from Elias than boasting. Samuel preferred the barn cats. He named each one. Even those Elias had never noticed were different. Ruth followed him with the cloth rabbit tucked under one arm. By February, the children no longer stopped talking when Elias entered a room. They still watched him carefully. One evening, Samuel left a small wooden figure beside Elias's plate. It had 4 legs of uneven length and 2 grooves cut for horns. "What's this?" Elias asked. "A bull. Looks poorly." Samuel's face fell. Elias turned the figure over. Poorly tempered, I mean. Samuel smiled. The wooden bowl remained on the mantel. Clara noticed things without mentioning them. She noticed that Elias never entered the parlor after dark. She noticed the pale square on the wall, where a framed portrait had once hung. She noticed the small red shoe beneath a cabinet. While sweeping, she picked it up, dusted it, and set it on the shelf, rather than throwing it away. Elias saw it there that evening. He said nothing. Neither did she. The winter tightened its grip. During the first week of March, a heifer became trapped in a drift near the creek. Elias and Thomas worked until dusk to free her. They returned soaked to the knees, their hands numb. Clara had hot water waiting. She placed a towel before Thomas, then another before Elias. Her fingers paused over a tear in his coat. "Give me that after supper. It'll hold." It has not held. Elias looked at the split seam. He removed the coat. She repaired it beneath the lamplight, while the children played with buttons on the floor. Elias sat across from her, sharpening a pocket knife. The scrape of stone against steel mixed with the low murmur of the stove. He had known women who filled silence from fear of it. Clara seemed to understand that silence could be shared. In April, the snow began to sink into itself. Water ran beneath the crust. The roof dripped steadily. Brown grass appeared on the southern slopes, flattened but alive. Elias repaired the chicken coop. When he finished, he found Ruth standing behind him, with 3 bent nails in her palm. "For you," she said. He accepted them solemnly. "Good nails. They're crooked." "So is the coop," she laughed. It was the first time Elias laughed too. The sound startled him. Clara heard it from the porch. She looked down at the shirt she was mending, but not before Elias saw her smile. Spring arrived slowly, then all at once. The valley turned green. Cottonwoods along the creek opened pale leaves. Calves stumbled through the pasture on uncertain legs. The Bennett children changed with the season. Thomas gained color in his face and strength in his shoulders. Samuel stopped hiding bread in his pockets. Ruth's cough disappeared. Clara remained careful. She counted every sack of flour. She recorded each egg sold in town. She worked even when there was nothing left to do. Once, Elias found her washing already clean jars. "You can sit down," he said. "I am not tired." "That wasn't what I said." She set the jar on the cloth. For a moment, her hands trembled. Then she sat. Elias placed a cup of coffee before her. They drank without speaking. In May, Clara planted beans beside the house. Elias marked off a larger garden with twine. "We may not be here for the harvest," she said. He pushed a stake into the soil. "Plant them anyway." The words followed her for days. Mercer's Crossing noticed the change at the Ward ranch. People saw Elias buying bolts of cloth, school slates, and peppermint sticks. They saw him riding with Thomas beside him. They saw Clara at church with the children, sitting 2 pews behind Elias. Some approved, others counted the months since her arrival, and whispered. The loudest voice belonged to Horace Bell, the county assessor and owner of half the buildings on Mercer Street. Bell wore polished boots, even in mud, and carried a silver watch he checked whenever another person spoke. He approached Clara outside the general store in early June. Elias had gone to the smithy. Thomas was loading flour into the wagon. "Mrs. Bennett," Bell said, "I understand your late husband owed money in Nebraska." Clara went still. Thomas stopped lifting the sack. Bell smiled pleasantly. "A note was transferred to my office. $78, plus interest. My husband is dead. Debt can outlive a man. He owned nothing when he died. He signed his name." Clara's face lost its color. Bell lowered his voice. "A widow in your position should be careful where she settles. Mr. Ward may not appreciate creditors appearing at his door." Elias returned before Clara answered. He looked at Bell, then at her. "What happened?" "Business," Bell said. Elias stepped between them. "Your business is in town." Bell touched 2 fingers to his hat. "For now." That evening, Clara packed the trunk. Elias found it near the bedroom door. The children sat at the kitchen table. Samuel was crying without sound. Thomas stared at the floor. Clara folded Ruth's dress. "We will leave in the morning." "No," Elias said. "The debt is mine. Bell buys old notes for pennies. Then he frightens people into paying the full amount. He can place a claim. Not on my land. He can cause trouble. He already does." Clara closed the trunk. "You do not understand. I understand Bell. You do not understand me." Her voice rose, then broke. She looked toward the children and lowered it again. "My husband borrowed that money after the fever took his work. He said it was for medicine. Some was. The rest went to cards. When he died, the men he played with came to the house. They took the stove, the mule, even Thomas's boots." Thomas's jaw tightened. Clara gripped the edge of the trunk. "Every place we go, someone learns of the note. Then comes the same look, the same question. What did she do wrong? Why should anyone take in a woman with 3 children and another man's debt?" Elias stood in the hallway. He wanted to tell her Bell could not drive them out. The words would not come easily. Clara lifted the trunk lid. "You have done enough." Elias looked past her into the room. 4 months earlier, the beds had been bare frames. Now Ruth's cloth rabbit rested against a pillow. Samuel's stones lined the windowsill. Thomas's coat hung from a wooden peg. Clara's sewing basket stood beside the wider bed. "You're not leaving," Elias said. "I cannot let my troubles become yours. They already are." She looked at him sharply. Elias drew a slow breath. "Because you live here." Clara stared. The children did not move. Elias placed one hand on the trunk and closed the lid. "I prepared 4 beds because I knew you were bringing 3 children. That was the sensible reason." He looked toward the hallway, toward the rooms he had kept shut for 6 years. "The other reason was that I was tired of hearing an empty house." Clara's eyes filled, but she did not look away. Elias continued. "My wife died bringing our daughter into the world. The child lived 3 winters. Fever took her in this house. Afterward, I shut every door I could." Ruth slipped from her chair and came to stand beside him. Elias rested a hand lightly on her hair. "I thought keeping rooms empty was the same as keeping them safe." Clara covered her mouth. "It isn't," he said. The next morning, Bell rode to the ranch with a deputy and a leather folder. Elias met them at the gate. Clara stood on the porch. Thomas stayed beside her. Bell opened the folder. "I have come to collect $78 and accrued interest." "Show the note," Elias said. Bell held it up. Elias examined the signature, then the date. "You bought this last month. That is lawful. For how much?" "That is irrelevant." The deputy shifted in his saddle. Elias looked at him. "Mrs. Bennett's husband died without property. The debt is unsecured. You cannot take her wages, her children, or anything on this ranch." Bell's pleasant expression thinned. "I can petition the court." "Do it. It will cost you." Elias stepped closer. "No. It will cost you, because then the judge will ask why you altered the interest figure." Bell's eyes flicked toward the paper. Elias had noticed the darker ink the moment Bell unfolded it. The deputy noticed now. Bell closed the folder. "This matter is not finished. It is on my land." Bell turned his horse and rode away. The deputy remained long enough to tip his hat to Clara. "I expect the judge will want to see that note," he said. By the end of the week, Horace Bell had left Mercer's Crossing. The county office found 3 other altered debts in his files. No one mentioned the widow's note again. Summer settled over Bitter Creek Valley. The grass grew high around the fences. Beans climbed the strings beside the house. Clara hung washing beneath a blue sky, while Ruth chased grasshoppers through the yard. Thomas rode the bay mare alone for the first time. Samuel carved another wooden animal and insisted it was a horse, though Elias judged it closer to a chair. At supper one evening, Clara placed a small leather pouch beside Elias's plate. Inside were coins. "What's this?" "My wages, less what we used." Elias pushed the pouch back. You earned those. We have had room and food. You worked for both. Clara rested her hands on the table. Then what happens when the harvest is finished? The children became quiet. Elias looked around the kitchen. The curtains were open. Warm air moved through the window. The wooden bowl stood on the mantel beside the little red shoe. He reached into his pocket and drew out 4 small brass keys. He had found them in his father's desk weeks before. He had cleaned them one by one. He placed a key before Clara, then one before Thomas, one before Samuel, one before Ruth. Ruth picked hers up. What does it open? The front door. We already come through the front door. Elias nodded. Now you can unlock it. Clara touched the key with one finger. Are you asking us to stay? I'm saying the beds are yours. Her eyes lifted to his. And the house? Elias looked at the children, at the bread cooling near the stove, and at the late sun lying golden across the floorboards. The house, too. Clara rose and walked around the table. She stopped close enough that he could see the fine lines left by hard years around her eyes. You should be certain, she said. I was certain when I built 4 beds in one afternoon. You did not know us. No. And now. Elias took her hand. Now I do. Outside, wind moved softly through the cottonwoods. The open door swung once on its hinges. Thomas crossed the kitchen and closed it against the evening chill. Then he turned the key in the lock.